Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2017 faculty lecture. My name is Priscilla Butler, and I'm here as the Academic Senate President. I wanted to remind you, in case you haven't read it recently, what our selection criteria are for the faculty lecturer. And this is a quote. Selection as the annual faculty lecturer is the highest honor bestowed on an SBCC faculty member. This honor distinguishes a full-time faculty member for excellence in teaching, librarianship, or counseling, and overall contributions to SBCC. So in preparing for this event today, it was very interesting to me because I read some of our earliest faculty lecturers, and if you're interested, they're online. And I looked at the history of this. This was actually developed as an academic senate initiative in the academic year of 1979-1980. So this is the 38th annual faculty lecture. Very exciting, yes. So our format today, I am here to welcome you, and then Kathy Malloy will actually be doing the introduction of this year's faculty lecturer. So Kathy.
Thank you. I'm honored to introduce this year's faculty lecturer, mathematics professor Pam Gunther. As you've read her biography, you've seen that she's been a teacher since she first began talking, interpreting to her deaf parents and teaching her younger siblings. Some might say that she's never really stopped teaching or talking ever since. And it's clear to anyone who knows her that she has an incredible work ethic and that she has never stopped searching for answers, especially about those things that helped make her such an effective teacher. I first got to know Pam about 10 years ago. The Senate had just led a campus-wide student success initiative that resulted in the Partnership for Student Success, SBCC's collaboration of tutoring programs. We needed someone to represent the math lab and oversee the expansion. So I asked Pam, she was department chair at the time, if she'd be willing to take it on. That was the first of many of my requests, and Pam has never said no. If she cares about something and sees that it's worthwhile, she is always willing to take on any task, no matter how much work is involved. And this is where I apologize to her family. Dave, Colin, Maddie, who's in Washington, D.C., sorry about that. Over these last 10 years, she's worked to make the Math Lab an outstanding resource for students, to develop with some of her math colleagues effective training and strategies for gateway tutors, and to increase the success of developmental math students, equipping them with skills and strategies necessary to complete their college goals. She's even turned some of these reluctant math students into math majors, and some even into math teachers. I couldn't begin to list, even briefly, all the work that Pam has done and continues to do to help her students succeed. Her work is known mainly by those of you who have been involved with her in these countless projects. She never seeks the spotlight, and she may be the least self-promoting person I know. And while all of the work she does has an impact on student success, the work she has done to successfully accelerate developmental math students through their required courses is, in my mind, where she's had the most impact on our students and on our faculty. Dissatisfied with the progress that many students were making through the required math courses, she researched and developed her math immersion course that enabled students to complete beginning and intermediate algebra in one semester. Her success in this course inspired many of us, and when the college received its first Title V Hispanic Serving Institutions grant in 2010, we looked to Pam for advice and for leadership as she brought together other interested math faculty to design new accelerated models to help students complete their required courses more quickly and successfully. She continues to be a driving force in the Express the Success program, working with her math and English colleagues to research and design the kind of non-cognitive curriculum that has proven so successful in transforming students' mindsets and providing them with strategies for success, both in the classroom and in life. Her talk today, I Think I Can, Applying Neuroscience and Non-Cognitive Research in the Classroom, highlights some of those research findings. So without further delay, it is my great pleasure that I introduce our 2017 faculty lecturer, my colleague, my friend, and a mentor to so many, Pam Gunther.
I'm gonna cry right away. Thank you, Kathy. That was, you made me sound really awesome, but I don't know if all of that applies. Before I go too far, because I'm afraid I'll forget, I really want to give a shout out to our IT and tech people here. Jason, Oren, Clyde, Jeff. I've had to work with them a lot in the last 3 days, and they've been very patient with me. They've made me laugh. They've calmed me down. So they're amazing, and we're really lucky to have them. Thank you, guys. Okay. So welcome to Board of Trustees, administration, faculty, staff, my students, my family, friends. I feel really honored and humbled to have been selected as the faculty lecturer. I've had a chance this year to get to know some of the past lecturers a little better, and I'm pretty awed by that group. I feel really privileged to be a part of the floaties, as they say, and become a member of that gang. And I'm going to tell you what, it feels like a gang sometimes. I also want to thank the interpreters here today. I am the oldest child of deaf parents, and so I spent many, many, many hours of my life interpreting, and I know it can be very exhausting and challenging, so I'm apologizing in advance that I talk so fast. You think I would have learned not to do that, but I haven't. Okay, so I think I can. Applying neuroscience and non-cognitive research in the classroom. Some of you might be thinking, I have no business talking about this because I'm not a neuroscientist and I'm not a cognitive psychologist, and I'm not. But before we do that, I think some of you may also be wondering, what the heck does non-cognitive mean? And some of you may be hearing this word and you're not quite sure what it means. And I do want to acknowledge it's a really crummy word. It's a crummy word for a good thing. It's so crummy that even in the research, people don't like to use it. They're trying to find other words. So they're using things like soft skills, character skills, executive functions, personal success skills, 21st century skills, grit, social emotional learning. And yes, this list could go on and on and on. So the fact that there's a list that long tells you that there's some dissatisfaction with the phrase. Let's look at a list of what are considered non-cognitive traits, skills, or abilities. So things like perseverance, resilience, Kelly, conscientiousness, self-efficacy, belonging, social skills, study habits, organization, patience, punctuality, all of these skills. What's the definition of cognitive? So Webster's definition says, of, relating to, being, or involving conscious intellectual activity, or based on or capable of being reduced to empirical factual knowledge. So relating to or involving conscious intellectual activity. I think that a lot of these things on this list definitely would require conscious intellectual activity. And so you can see the problem people have with calling these things non-cognitive. So the term was coined by economists that wanted it to represent or stand for the skills that can't really be tested on an IQ test or on an academic test. I don't like the word very much either because it bothers me, but I'm not doing the research on it, so I will just accept the word that they've given us, and until they come up with something better, that's the word we're going to use. So non-cognitive skills have been broadly defined as patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Carol Dweck has made it a little more specific with respect to academic environments, and she says that they include students' beliefs about themselves, their goals in school, their feelings of social belonging, and their self-regulatory skills. Now, why do we care about these skills? I'm hoping that as you're looking at this as a teacher or a parent or a student, that you do see how important these skills are to academic success, to life success. They're often called 21st century skills because they are the skills that employers are seeking. Now, neuroscience tells us that cognitive skills and non-cognitive skills, they're deeply intertwined. And if we want to improve cognitive skills, we actually have to be boosting non-cognitive skills too. Research consistently shows that high school grades are a better predictor of success in college than SAT or ACT scores are. So why would that be? What are high school grades possibly capturing that those standardized tests aren't capturing? Anyone? Don't all speak at once. Effort, yeah, effort. Perseverance, maybe. Study habits, motivation. Don't those all look like our list of non-cognitive factors? Okay, great. This all sounds awesome. But are those things innate traits that you're born with? Or can they be learned, or can they be taught? So while there's definitely a genetic component to personality that does make it a little bit difficult to change, behaviors definitely can be changed. And those behaviors and thoughts, in turn, reshape your brain. Have you ever heard of the phrase, fake it till you make it? So it's that kind of thing. So this leads me to the other big word in the talk, which is neuroscience. Neuroscience is the branch of life sciences that deals with the anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, or molecular biology of the nerves and nervous tissue, and especially with their relation to behavior and learning. So neuroscientists typically study the physical brain. And then cognitive psychologists, they typically study the mind and mental functions. So things like perception, reasoning, language, memory, attention. Neuroscientists, cognitive psychologists, and educational researchers all study the mind in different ways. And until recently, these fields have all been relatively separated. But now there's an emerging field called mind, brain, and education research. And what they're doing is they're working to bring information from all of those areas together to help inform and enhance teaching and learning. So for instance, neuroscientists studied how common misconceptions can interfere with learning math and science. And they determined that you needed to increase or enhance executive functioning to make it so that people could learn that correct information. And we're going to talk about executive functioning in a little bit if you're not sure what that is. So now my ushers, this is the time where we're going to have a little fun. Everybody hopefully has a pencil. And my ushers are going to give you a quiz. And you need to keep this quiz face down until I tell you to turn it over. Don't cheat, don't look at it. Keep it face down. Face down. And they're different, so you can't copy. Keep it face down. No. Cheater, cheater. She asked if she could use her phone. Okay, no. This is an individual quiz. Are we, okay. Does everybody have one? Because, I can't see very well up here. Everybody has one? Okay, when I say go, you will have 1 minute to complete this. And what I had planned was that when you finish, you raise your hand and you get a piece of candy. But we can't have candy in here. So just remember that you finished, and when you leave, there will be candy outside there, and you can take a piece of candy there, okay? Okay. No, ready? When I say go, turn it over. Ready? Whoa. Okay. Go. Maybe we should say when you're finished, stand up or something. Okay. Wasn't that fun? How many of you remember doing these in grade school? I remember doing them, and I loved them, but I'm wondering how many of you kind of got triggered the minute you knew it was a quiz or you turn it over. Yeah, so my kids say triggered. I got triggered, so. So we're going to talk in a minute about how emotion can affect memory and recall, but I loved these things. I was good at them. And I loved getting candy because I rarely got candy at home when I was growing up, so that candy was an extreme motivator for me, and I really did fine at it. It turns out that it's possible that my parents being deaf had an impact on me learning my multiplication facts. So first let's talk a little bit about the multiplication facts. So what's the deal with the multiplication facts? I'm thinking of Sherry right now. If I could do Seinfeld, I would. What's the deal with multiplication facts? Okay, what's the deal with our multiplication facts in the tables? Why are they so much harder for people to learn and remember when compared to things like addition facts? Well, brain imaging is helping us see why they might be harder. It turns out multiplication requires the brain to recruit more neural networks than it does when it's doing adding or subtracting. Okay, great, so it's a little harder, but so what? I mean, we do it all the time, right? We do it year after year after year. We have to practice them a lot. So why do people still make mistakes? Well, issues with memorizing the multiplication table come up for a couple of reasons. One of them is it's often the first time in elementary school where our intuition and our counting strategies are no longer used in mathematics, and they're replaced with memorizing, and sometimes memorizing with no meaning. It's our own brain that's actually causing us difficulty with these facts. So here are the things that can cause trouble with memorizing the multiplication tables. Our associative memory, pattern recognition, and language. So our associative memory is our brain's ability to detect patterns and make associations based on those patterns. So this can cause problems when memorizing the multiplication table because we actually memorize it through language. And many of the facts in the table, they sound and look the same, especially sort of here in the middle of the table, and that's often where people struggle. We have 40, 42, 45, 48, 49. So our associative memory, when it hears or thinks of 40, it's pulling all of those things up. It's pulling all of them up and having to figure out which one is the right one. Okay? So we can memorize the multiplication table. We can do it the same way we memorize songs, the same way we memorize poems, but it's those patterns that can cause trouble. And imaging studies have shown that when we're doing exact arithmetic, that it's actually lighting up the language processing centers of our brain. When we're doing approximations, when we're trying to use number sense to make sense of something, it lights up number sense and spatial reasoning parts of our brain. So now, my parents are deaf. My first language was American Sign Language. I also was the oldest, so I was recruited to do interpreting pretty young, so I had to learn spoken English quickly as well. So this may have had an impact on my language processing centers. Sign language is a physical language, and research has shown that it grows parts of your brain that have to do with spatial reasoning and motor movement. There's also research that shows that your native language impacts where in your brain arithmetic is done. So if Chinese is your native language, your arithmetic processing is taken care of in a slightly different place than if English is your native language. So it's entirely possible that because I had exposure to these two different languages, my language processing centers and my spatial reasoning and number sense were enhanced. So it may have been something that allowed me to memorize my multiplication tables easily. What can we do? So if people are struggling with the multiplication facts, is there anything we can do to help them? Research shows that it's important to emphasize number sense and counting strategies when people are learning their arithmetic, so addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, so that they can build robust patterns and models for those operations, so when they're memorizing their multiplication facts, they have things to attach it to. I'm going to show you now an example, one of my favorite examples of what happens when you memorize mathematical procedures with no number sense or no conceptual understanding.
Hey, Abbott, how you doing?
So,
I watched your house this week. You said you'd give me $13 a day watching your house.
yeah.
Perfect. Well, you have the money?
Yep, here is your $28.
Awesome. Whoa, wait a minute. I watched your house for 7 days, and $13 a day is more than $28.
Oh, it's not?
Yeah, it is. $13 a day for 7 days is way more than 28.
Oh, it's not?
Yeah. Did you go to school?
Yeah.
And did you learn how to multiply, divide, and add?
Yeah.
Well, then you should know $13 a day for 7 days is more than $28.
Are you trying to cheat me out of my money or something?
No, I'm not trying to cheat you. I'm just trying to. Okay, wait. Listen, I'll give you your money back if you can show me that $13 a day for 7 days is $28.
Okay, fine. Right here?
Yeah, actually, do it right here on the board. That'll
Do you
work.
have a marker?
Yeah, I have a marker too.
I'm going to do 28 divided by 7, make it easy for you.
Yeah, perfect. Show me how to divide.
Okay. 7 up here,
Yep.
and 7
And 28.
divided by
Yep.
28.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's a big 7.
Well, 7 into 2?
That big 7's not going into that 2.
Not a chance. 7 into 8?
7 to 8 goes one time.
One time.
Yep.
That's 7. 28 minus 7?
28 minus 7, that's 21.
21.
Yep.
20. How many times does 7 go into 21?
7 goes into 21 3 times. Wait a minute. That's not right. Something's not right there. You didn't divide that correctly. Hold on. Listen, forget the division. How about you multiply it? Because $13 a day for 7 days. There, do that. 13 times 7.
I'm going to emulsify it?
No, multiply.
Okay, jeez. 13.
Right.
Times
Because $13 a day, 7 days. Yeah, multiply that.
7 times 3.
7 times 3 is 21.
7
Yep.
times 1.
7 times 1 is 7. Wait a minute. Hang on a second.
Give me my money.
No. You're not doing something right here. That's not right either. I know it's more than $28. Listen. Let's just add. Let's just make it easy and add. Let's just take 13. I want you to write 13 7 times. There we go. Write 13 7 times for me.
You want me to addition it up?
No, I want you to add. Add 13 7 times. There you go.
Just said it. Okay.
Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What'd you spread them out for so far?
Well, now it looks like a flock of seagulls running into electric poles.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, put a line under it for me. Let's just add that now. Let's add 13 7 times. Well, wait a minute. Let me add. All right, now you get your funny business. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21.
22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28.
So I want to thank my husband and my son for doing that for me. It's an Abbott and Costello routine, but the captioning that existed on YouTube was horrible, so they reenacted it for me, so thank you guys. Okay, so educational neuroscientist David Sousa calls teachers brain changers. I'm not a neuroscientist or a cognitive psychologist, but I am a teacher and I'm a parent. So I'm a brain changer, Lots of us in here are brain changers. It sounds important and it sounds a little scary. So as teachers, parents, and students are brain changers too because they're changing their own brains. It can be useful to know how our brains work and how our brains learn. So I want to remind just one more time, I'm not a neuroscientist. I am not a cognitive psychologist. I am not an expert in these domains. So all of the information I'd like to share with you comes from the lens of an educator that is very interested in the brain science and how it impacts how people learn. Here are some other recent discoveries aside from knowing where multiplication is processed in the brain. Some other recent discoveries that really impact how people learn or what we know about how people learn. The first one is the biggie, neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to make physical, chemical, and biological changes to itself in response to its environment, to behavior, to thinking and emotions. So think about that for a second. Our behavior changes our brain. Our thinking changes our brain. Our emotions change our brain. This is really cool, and it's kind of mind-blowing. We used to think that the brain that you were born with was the brain that you were stuck with, okay? We used to think that intelligence and other traits, that they were genetic and fixed, and then there wasn't much you could do about what you were born with. But what we know now is that our brain is plastic, that it's malleable, that it's changed with experience. So that's not to say that genetics don't play a part. They do play a part. They just don't play as big a part as we used to think they did. Even identical twins do not have identical brains because experience and learning physically alters the structure of your brain. Imaging studies have shown that practicing mindfulness, so meditation, breathing exercises, that it physically alters your brain. And there's research out of the Max Planck Institute in Germany where there's a researcher that's training people to be empathetic and training people to be compassionate, and that they're seeing actual physical changes in the brain, but in different parts of the brain for empathy and for compassion. So it's pretty fascinating that those sorts of things can be trained and can change our brain. Another recent development in neuroscience is neurogenesis. So what is neurogenesis? It's the generation of new neurons in your brain. Again, we used to think that the neurons you were born with were all you were ever going to have, and that the brain can't generate any more neurons after birth. But we're now finding that that's also not true, that we can generate new neurons in certain situations. And actually, that exercise can have influence on this. So it's something to think about if you're not getting enough of it. But also thinking about what may be happening in some grade schools where the amount of time for recess and PE keeps getting shortened and shortened and shortened. Might be not a good idea. We know that emotions affect learning, they affect memory, they affect recall. So how maybe did some of you feel really negative when you were about to take your multiplication quiz? Did anybody feel negative? Some of you have some anxiety when you saw it. Did it affect possibly your recall of the facts because you were having a little bit of anxiety with respect to that? So that's something to think about. We know that our brains do not multitask, contrary to what some of us may think. Or my teenage daughter. Our brains don't multitask. Our brains do alternate tasking, so switching back and forth, and we don't do it very well, by the way. Okay? We know that there are actual physical differences in the brains of people who have dyslexia or dyscalculia or other learning disabilities. We know that our working memory have capacity limits. We also know that, again, our native language can impact what those capacity limits are. We know brain pathways that are involved in learning to read and learning to problem solve, and that knowledge is helping to inform pedagogy and education. Okay, so non-cognitive neuroscience. What do these things have to do with each other? Well, neuroscience research is increasingly showing the importance of non-cognitive skills in acquiring cognitive skills. For instance, we know that emotion affects learning, memory, and recall. We know that experiences shape the brain. A lot of researchers prefer to look at our non-cognitive factors through the lens of executive functions. So executive functions refer to a group of mental skills that help us get things done. Here's a common list of what are considered executive functions. So think of executive functions as a CEO of your brain. Impulse control, emotional control, flexibility, working memory, self-monitoring, planning and setting priorities, task initiation, organization. So if we look at our list of non-cognitive factors, seem like a lot of overlap in those? Yeah. So executive functions depend on the prefrontal cortex in your brain and the other areas that it's connected to. And guess which part of your brain is the last part of your brain to fully develop? Prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex is not optimally regulating your behavior until you're around 25. Or in the case of my husband, like, 40. Just kidding. So, it's also important to remember that trauma, poverty, and neurological problems, these can all affect executive functioning. So, and nutritional deficiencies, these all can affect executive functioning. The good news, though, is that neuroscience is showing us that you can increase executive functioning. The prefrontal cortex is malleable, and these skills can be taught and learned. Ideally, this training takes place in childhood. However, if it doesn't mean it can't occur later in life. So Markman and Duke say you can teach an old dog new tricks, but you and the dog have to be more patient. We aren't born with these skills, but we are born with the ability to learn these skills. Again, though, abuse, violence, neglect, poverty, nutritional deficiencies. There are lots of things that it can impact the acquisition of these skills. But what's cool is those that are most in need of executive functioning, they're the ones who make the largest gains when they get training in executive functioning. I know that when I first began teaching, I kind of fell into the trap of interpreting when my students weren't persevering or they didn't have the right study habits, or they didn't have good time management skills. I would interpret that to mean that they weren't motivated or they didn't care or they weren't interested. But this conversation that I started to have over and over again with my students made me think differently about this. So I would say to a student, "Nice job on that test." And the student would say, "That's the first time I've ever gotten an A on a math test." And I would say, "Well, that's surprising to me because you seem to be doing all of the things as a student that would lead to success. What are you doing differently now that you didn't do before?" And they would say, "Oh, I do the homework now." And I'd say, "Okay." Or, when I have a question, I ask it now. Or, I'm keeping an organized notebook now. And I would scratch my head a little bit, like, what were you doing before? So I started to realize, maybe it's not that they're not motivated and not interested, it's that they don't know how. And a lot of us have had different experiences in our life that may have allowed us to develop these skills. So even though I only graduated high school 5 years ago, I struggle sometimes when I'm trying to remember where did I learn these non-cognitive skills. I can think of specific teachers. I've had teachers, my math teacher in high school in particular was very strict, but spent a lot of time teaching us how to take notes in math, how to study for math tests, made us analyze our tests when we got them back. So I'm sure that had an impact. But I'm not sure what other, maybe peers around me, but it's hard to think about what may have had an impact. I'd like for you to think about for a second, how did you develop your non-cognitive skills that led to success? Or if you're developing them now, what's helping you to develop them now? You don't have to tell me, I just want you to think about it for a minute. How did you develop them? Well, not everyone has had the same experiences at school or at home, so a lot of people may not have developed these skills before they get to us. Our students may come with these skills, but they might not come with these skills. Or perhaps you're a student and you recognize that you have some work to do on these skills. But remember that these skills, they can be taught and they can be learned. Farrington and her colleagues in Chicago they did an extensive literature review on non-cognitive. So some of you are saying, yes, I've heard this word. It's really kind of becoming the word du jour right now. So they did an extensive literature review on it, and they decided to categorize all of these non-cognitive traits and skills and abilities into these 5 categories: academic behaviors, academic perseverance, academic mindsets, learning skills, social skills. And then they synthesized all of this research and created a model that would show the relationship amongst these things. And here's the model. So what I want you to see here is you see academic mindsets up here, and I want you to be thinking about that for a second. That big one up there. Do you see how it's impacting everything? Social skills, academic perseverance, academic behavior, academic performance, learning strategies. The researchers stated these 4 quotes for representing academic mindsets. I belong in this academic community. My ability and competence grow with my effort. I can succeed at this, and this work has value for me. So these are academic mindsets. And then I also want you for a second to just look over here at learning strategies. So do you see that learning strategies also impact academic perseverance, academic behaviors, and academic performance? So those are the 2 things I'd like to focus on for the rest of today: academic mindsets and learning strategies. So for the rest of today, I'm going to talk about growth mindset, belonging, and then some learning strategies. And growth mindset and belonging are part of the academic mindsets. In the early 2000s, my colleague Sherry Masuman went to an AMATIC conference and brought back to me this amazing stuff from Diana Hestwood about how the brain learns. And it was wonderful stuff. It was, at the first initially, were these really kind of copied too many times handouts, but it talked about how the brain learned, in particular how it learned mathematics. And I decided I would start sharing it with my students at the beginning of this semester. And I loved it because it would talk to them about how your brain had neurons, so here's your little neuron, and that your neurons grew dendrites when you did hard work. And also what happens, so the more you practice, the more work you do, the more dendrites you get, the stronger those dendrites are. And the more you practice something, this axon here that extends from the neuron and connects to other neurons, that axon would get myelinated, yeah, there you go. And it would get a whole bunch of myelin on it. And what that would do is that would make the electrical signals travel really fast, so you could recall things faster. So thank you, Sherry. In particular, what I loved in there is that it talked about the emphasis on that you only grow dendrites for what you do. So what gets fired gets wired. So if you just come to class and you watch the teacher do problems or you watch your classmates do problems, you will have dendrites now for watching other people do problems. But you will not have the dendrites you need to do problems, okay? So I would use this to help remind them why they should be doing the homework. They need to do the homework so that they're growing the dendrites so they can do the problems. And I would use this language in class when we were doing something challenging. I would remind them, hey, can't you just feel those dendrites growing? Because they grow when we're doing something hard. I would remind them that dendrites can only grow from other dendrites, so you really have to stay on top of the homework so that your dendrites have other dendrites to grow from. It was awesome because something amazing happened. After doing this, student complaints about homework almost disappeared. And more students were doing the homework. And more students were active in class and asking questions. So that was the beginning of my obsession with brain science. Wow, this is cool. You just remind them why they have to do the homework and they will quit complaining about it. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. This is one of my favorites. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. It turns out Henry Ford was onto something here. Carol Dweck has done years and years of research on the impact that your thoughts about learning have on your learning. So she's coined this term growth mindset. So what is growth mindset? Growth mindset is the belief that intelligence, abilities, and talents can be improved with effort, practice, appropriate strategies, and help from others. So what the research has shown is that people who have a growth mindset tend to learn more, tend to be more successful in school and in life, versus having a fixed mindset. So if you believe that intelligence is something that you're born with and you can't change, then you are less likely to be successful. So there's this nice little chart here that kind of shows the difference. That if you have a growth mindset, if you believe that intelligence can be developed, then it generally leads to a desire to learn. That's your goal. And so then you embrace challenges. You persist despite obstacles. So as Angela Duckworth says, you do not believe that failure is a permanent condition. You see effort as a path to mastery. You recognize that you have to work hard. You learn from criticism and feedback, and you're actually inspired by the success of others. But if you have a fixed mindset, if you believe that intelligence is static, then it leads to a desire to look smart. You don't want to do anything where it might not show that you're smart. And when that happens, you avoid challenges, you give up easily when you fail, you see effort as something you shouldn't have to do if you were smart, you ignore useful feedback, and you're threatened by the success of others. So there have been a lot of studies done on growth mindsets. Can we intervene and do some training on growth mindset? So can we have a growth mindset about growth mindset? One example is a study done at a 7th grade school in an urban low-income minority school in New York, and the students' math grades were starting to go down. So they took students, multiple students from multiple classes, and then they separated them into 2 groups. And the first group only learned study skills, and then the second group learned study skills and growth mindset. So they learned about how your brain can grow, how it gets smarter by doing challenging work. And now their teachers, they didn't know which group each of their students was in. So the teachers hopefully didn't have much of an influence on this. The group that was only taught study skills, their grades actually declined. So they're in the red here. And the group that was taught study skills with growth mindset, their grades increased. So the mind is everything, what you think you become. And then, maybe Buddha said this, but maybe not. So a lot of things said Buddha said it, and then others said that that's a lie. So I don't know who said it, but it's still cool. Given that we know that our thoughts and our behaviors, they can change our brains, then it seems reasonable that mindsets are also malleable and that they can be changed. And they're not static. So nobody's really all growth mindset or all fixed mindset. Most people have a growth mindset about some parts of their lives and maybe a fixed mindset about others. Like I still have a fixed mindset about my ability to bowl or play softball or those things, so I need to work on that. In fact, they gave expert mathematicians some tricky problems to solve, and when they were solving those tricky problems, they were solving with a growth mindset. So they were persevering, and the language they were using was all growth mindset language. But then when they gave them a tricky poem to analyze, they started to behave as if they were in a fixed mindset. So they would say, I've never been good at these things. And then they did the same thing with experts in literature. They gave the experts in literature tricky poems, and they were really digging into those and had a growth mindset about analyzing the tricky poems. But when they gave them tricky problems, they started to go into a fixed mindset and say, I'm not really a math person. So the mindsets aren't fixed. They're malleable also, okay? The trick is, what we want to do is we want to recognize when we're having a fixed mindset about something, and maybe not just ourselves, but even people in our lives, maybe students. It's important that as teachers, we remember to have growth mindsets about our students. If we find ourselves in a fixed mindset, that we recognize that's what we're doing and we make an effort to move into a growth mindset. And then as parents and as teachers, the language that we use is also important, in particular with respect to praise. We have to be careful about the type of praise that we give. If we have to be careful not to praise things that might be perceived as innate or something that can't be changed, like intelligence. So in another Dweck study, students were given a relatively simple set of problems to solve, and when they were done, they were all told they did well. But half of them were told, you did well because you're smart. And the other half was told, you did well because you worked hard on these. After that, the students were all given a choice. You can either take this challenging test that you're going to learn something from, or you can take this pretty easy test that you will do well on. Okay? So, the students who were praised for effort, 92% of them chose the challenging test. Any guesses on what percent of the students praised for intelligence? What percentage of them chose the challenging test? It's not zero. 23%. 23% of those praised for intelligence chose the challenging test. And then after this, so the study continues. After this, she gave everybody a really hard test and then told them all they did not do well on it. So they were all told they failed this third test. After that, so finally, the last thing that they did is they gave the students a test very similar to the first one that they took, with the relatively simple problems that they were told they had done well on. Here are the results. So before the failure event, the red line is the students that were praised for effort. Yes. And the blue line is the students that were praised for intelligence. So notice that the students who were praised for effort did better when they took that initial test again, and the students who were praised for intelligence did worse when they took the test again. Okay? It's important that we're careful that our praise does not, that we don't praise intelligence or abilities or things that people would perceive as fixed. Instead, we want to praise process and effort. But be careful about false praise. So we don't want to praise effort if it doesn't lead to growth of some sort. Partly because people know when they haven't actually done something that's worthy of praise. If no learning has occurred, it would be better to say something like, let's take a look at what you already tried, and then let's talk about what you could try now. Another important characteristic of growth mindset is how struggles, mistakes, or setbacks are perceived. Remember, learning is hard work. If it's easy, you aren't really growing your brain. And often you learn the most when you make a mistake and correct it. There's an interesting dopamine reaction that happens in our brains when we make a mistake that actually creates neural changes in our brains and makes it more likely that the next time your brain will choose the correct response. It's also really important to remember that a lot of very, very successful people have failed a lot on their way to success. There's a recent study that examined how hearing about scientists' struggle stories would impact students' learning in science and their motivation. So some of the students were told achievement stories about scientists, which is what I remember learning is what the scientists actually accomplished. And then the other half of the students were told about the struggle stories of the scientists. So what they had to persist through in order to achieve what they had achieved. So what happened after they did this? The students who heard the struggle stories about the scientists, their grades went up and their motivation to learn went up. The students who heard only the achievement stories, their grades didn't even stay the same. They actually declined. Their grades declined. So as teachers, we can be mindful of sharing our struggle stories or the struggle stories of others in our discipline. We could also be building opportunities in our classes for students to analyze their mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. As students, we really need to remember how important mistakes are to learning, and we need to embrace those mistakes. Okay, so far with growth mindset, you believe that with hard work, strategies, and help from others, that your abilities and intelligence can grow. And it's been shown that having a growth mindset can lead to academic success. Also, there's lots of research out there if you'd like to look at it. Business success, lots of different situations where growth mindset has been applied. I just want to add one more thing to growth mindset before we move on. And that is the power of yet. Power of yet. Negative self-talk can be one of our worst enemies. So remember, our thoughts can change our brains. I love this next study about how powerful our thoughts are to our bodies. So there was a study done they were analyzing the ghrelin hormone, which is the hunger hormone. So when you are hungry, when it's time to eat again, your body releases the ghrelin hormone, tells your brain you're hungry, it's time to eat, and it starts to slow down your metabolism. What they did is they took some participants and they measured their ghrelin hormone before they did this particular study. And the scientists used to believe that the ghrelin hormone responded to just the nutrients that were in your stomach. So if they were gone, then you were good to go, it's time to eat again. What they did is they made this milkshake. Whoops, they made a milkshake here. So notice the milkshake is the same, right? What's different is what you think you are getting. So this says Senses Shake, fat-free, guilt-free, 104 calories. And this says indulgence, decadence, you deserve 620 calories. But the same milkshake. So when they gave these milkshakes to the participants, guess what happened? The people who believed they had gotten the indulgent shake, their ghrelin hormone dropped 3 times as much as the people who got this shake. So the ghrelin is not just responding to the nutrients. It's also responding to our thoughts, just what we thought we were getting. And when you think about some of the negative things we say to ourselves, I know that I'm guilty of this as well. I would like you just right now for a second to think about some of the crummy things you say to yourself. Like, what's one of the worst things you say to yourself? And kind of get it in mind right now. Does everybody have it in mind? Okay, turn to the person next to you and say it about them. What? Why? Do you not want to say it to them? Why don't you want to say it to them? I mean, we wouldn't want to say that to them. I mean, some people might, those of you that might be borderline sociopaths, but most of us would not want to say that to somebody. Because why? It's not nice, right? It's not kind. So why do we say such horrible things to ourselves? If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. It is incomplete. If we want to develop growth mindsets, we have to believe that we can improve, and we have to be mindful of our negative self-talk, and we need to replace it with positive talk. And this is where the power of yet can be useful. So we can say things like, I don't get it, yet. You see how throwing yet on there puts some promise, some hope, that there's time still for me to get it? So when you hear children in your life or students or people around you saying, I don't get this, I'm not good at this, throw the word yet on there. Yet. You're not good at it yet, but there's still possibility. I think my experiences, some other experiences in my life, helped foster a growth mindset in me from childhood. I heard a lot of stories growing up about how deaf people were not allowed to get driver's licenses for a long time because it was felt that it wouldn't be safe for them to drive. Until some research came out showing that they compensated for their lack of hearing with enhanced perceptual abilities or peripheral abilities, and also quicker response times to sudden visual stimuli, which I would learn when I would try to come in late at night and I'd forget and I'd turn the light on and that little tiny light would go under their bedroom door and they would wake up. So my family knows I can't sleep with the light on because I've kind of been trained that way. I think that gave me a sense that your brain changes based on your experiences in your life. I also know that my mom learned to play guitar when she was 19 and she's deaf. So I think that kind of also gave me this mindset that, shoot, you know, if she can learn guitar, I could probably learn anything I wanted to if I try. Might be harder for me to do some things, but I think I could do it if I try. Okay, let's go back to our academic mindsets. I haven't talked about the very beginning one here. I belong in this academic community. Let's try something here. So Kelly, are you free? Yeah. I'm going to put up a list of words. and just to that back corner over there, okay? So I'm going to put up a list of words, but hold on a second. Yes, just to them, though. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So, how many vowels were there? How many vowels were there? What are you guys laughing at? Oh, did you guys not know the rules? Did you not know the rules? Sometimes we come to situations and we don't know the rules for that situation. So a lot of times our students might come to school not knowing the rules of college. Or maybe you're a student that felt that way when you first came here. I know I did. I didn't quite know all the rules of college. I was the first in, well, sort of, skipped a generation of my family to go to college. So let's talk about how emotions affect learning, memory, and recall. Recent study shows that social disconnection actually probably triggers the same neural pathways as our survival needs do, like food, water, air, physical safety. And when our brain is worrying about things like our physical safety, when it's on heightened alert, looking for possible danger around us, then it interferes with attention and working memory. So what is belonging? Students with a sense of belonging in school, they feel socially connected, supported, and respected. They trust their teachers and their peers, and they feel like they fit in at school. They're not worried about being treated as a stereotype, and they are confident that they are seen as a person of value. There's quite a bit of research with respect to belonging in school and in workplaces, and it consistently shows that a sense of belonging has a powerful impact on success. So I know if you haven't looked at the research on stereotype threat, I strongly encourage you to do so. And this is what happens if you feel like you belong or don't belong. So if you have an example of adversity and you are a student from a social group that is negatively stereotyped or maybe just underrepresented in your academic field, so women or persons of color in mathematics, and you receive critical feedback from a teacher, if you feel that you belong, so if you believe this particular thing, this critical feedback, that it's typical, and that it's normal to worry about belonging when you struggle with something, then your interpretation of that feedback is, well, this is normal. This is what happens when you're in school. And your response is to keep working, keep studying, and your outcome is that you will do well. And when you do well, then it leads you back to believing you belong. But if you don't believe that that's a normal experience, then you say to yourself when you get that information, people like me don't belong here. And it causes you to withdraw from the academic experience and you don't do well, which then contributes to you feeling like you don't belong. Okay? It's cyclical. Poor academic performance bolsters the belief that you don't belong, while academic success bolsters the belief that you do. So what can we do? Can we do anything? So there's an interesting study done by Walter and Cohen. When they took sophomores at university, and they gave half the students a treatment where they would read stories or some messages from upperclassmen from different backgrounds and ethnicities, and these stories would talk about their struggles and how they felt when they first came to school and that they didn't feel like they belonged, but that they overcame it and they became confident students and learners. The control group got messages from upperclassmen, but these messages had nothing to do with belonging. They were things like, here's where you should go eat, and maybe go study at the library, or those kinds of things. And at the end of this, they had all the students make a video message to give to future students. You're going to now take this information, you're going to help future students. So explain what you had learned here. So what happened? That started at the sophomore year. Their senior year, they measured what percent of the students in those two groups were in the top 25% of their class. So this top dotted line here represents the white students in the study, and the bottom line represents the African American students in the study. This is the control group who did not get those belonging messages, and this is the treatment group who did get the belonging messages. Now you can see it doesn't appear to have had much impact on the white students, but it actually shrunk the achievement gap for the African American students. So remember we were talking earlier about those that might be in need of some of those executive functioning skills are the ones that when you give them training, they make the largest gains. So it's something to think about. Right now, at the University of Texas, Austin, David Yeager is doing something similar to this, but he's trying to do it on all incoming freshmen, so 8,000 students. He's doing an intervention on belonging. What he's finding is something similar here, that it doesn't seem to be having much of an impact on the advantaged students, but it is increasing the percentage of advantaged students that are completing 12 units by the end of their disadvantaged, excuse me. It's increasing the percentage of disadvantaged students that are completing 12 units by the end of their first semester on campus. I think it's interesting to note that Texas is a Research One institution, and they're struggling with a lot of the same issues that we're struggling with. A lot of this research is being done countrywide. What are some other strategies to promote belonging that show up in the research? Collaborative learning or active learning. When students have an opportunity to interact with other students in class, they are less likely to attribute their struggles to themselves and more to, this is challenging content, when they see that other students are also struggling. Positive interactions with peer and faculty, I hope that kind of speaks to itself, that you would feel that you belong if you have positive interactions with your peers and with faculty. Having a supportive climate on campus. And then high standards with support and encouragement. So high standards with high support. Students need to believe that they can accomplish those high standards, and they need to believe that you believe that they can accomplish those high standards. Okay, so that was growth mindset, belonging. Now we're going to talk about some learning strategies. So I'm going to teach you some things here quickly. You guys ready? We're going to learn some sign language. So I'm going to teach you some colors first. So the first, I know I'm not supposed to go over there. Here we go. I'm going to teach you some colors first. So we'll start with red. So red, you just use your first finger and you sort of touch your top lip. So this is red. Red. Blue, pull your thumb in and just shake your hand. Blue. Blue. Let's see, what else can we do? Green. Green is, you kind of like, you guys remember, he's squishing your head. So you kind of do this little pinchy thing with your fingers and then you just shake it. This is green. White. This is white. Yellow is kind of like hang loose, but not quite like hang loose, so yellow. Okay, you guys got those. Let's do a couple of others. Let's do flower. So flower. Flower. Roses is similar to flower, only you cross your fingers because this is like the letter R. And roses. Trees. Sky. Clouds. Look at you guys. It's awesome. World. So you're going to make like 2 threes like this, and then you're going to circle them. World. Awesome. You guys are ready. You ready? We're going to take a test now. Are you guys ready? You're ready. Whoops. Okay, here's your test. While I'm getting this ready over here. Here we go. Okay, your test is you need to interpret this song.
I I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom
Okay, well, hold on.
for me and you.
This isn't going quite as well as I had planned. So, why was that maybe challenging for you? I mean, I taught you all the signs. Yeah. What? You might need to practice, right? Maybe you need to practice, or maybe you need to do some certain kinds of activities to be ready for that test. So let's talk a little bit about learning strategies. So this is an awesome book. It's called Make It Stick. It's written by some cognitive psychologists. And what's awesome about it is it uses research to inform strategies that actually work to make learning stick. It also describes some common learning ideas that we need to get rid of. We need to abandon these. And the first of them is learning styles. We need to get rid of this. There is no empirical evidence to support that individuals have specific learning styles and that they learn best when that instruction and study habits match that preferred learning style. There's none. In fact, there's even a little bit of research that shows there's a negative correlation between those things happening. It is true that people have preferences, but even then, some of your best learning takes place when you stretch outside of your comfort zone. That's when your best learning takes place. The researchers actually think that learning styles are damaging because they label learners and they limit learners, rather than encouraging them to be flexible and to stretch themselves. And what research does show is that the learning or teaching technique should match the nature of the content. So for instance, if it's geometry, teaching it visually. If it's Shakespeare, maybe teaching it verbally. That the strategy should match the content. When the instructional style matches the nature of the content, all of the learners learn better, regardless of their particular learning preference. Okay? And we're actually kind of really crummy judges about how we learn best. So when students were instructed to study with the method they loved, and then instructed to study with a research-based method, and they were assessed afterward, they did better with the research-based method, but when you asked them which one was better for them, they still said the other one, even though they scored better when they used the research-based method. So what do the authors suggest we can do to improve teaching and learning? As teachers, what we can do is we can explain to students how learning works. So this is how your brain works. This is how your brain learns. This is what you need to do. We can teach students how to study. And we can make things challenging, because that's when your brain grows. As students, what are learning strategies that are research-based? So one of them is form a habit of self-quizzing. Space out your retrieval practice. Mix together different types of problems, and then we'll talk briefly about some other strategies. So one of the most important results from research is that struggle and difficulty, they actually lead to longer lasting memories. Things that are easy to learn are also easily forgotten. So I think for a lot of times I'll tell my students, if I want to grow this muscle, should I be lifting a 1 pound weight over and over again? Or what should I do if I really want to grow this muscle? I need to challenge that muscle by increasing the weight. When learning is effortful, we actually grow our brains and we make more connections. So our brains are designed to forget. We can't possibly remember everything. Like I can't remember what color shirt everybody has on today because that's not important to my brain. So what we have to do is we have to teach our brains what we want it to remember. So we have to practice retrieving memories repeatedly. And it's that act of retrieval, the part where you go try to dig that thing out and remember it, that actually strengthens those memories. And when you're retrieving those memories, they actually get modified and changed based on new information that you have. Okay, so that repeated retrieval makes it more likely that you will easily recall that information later. Students often think rereading material is a good study strategy. And it seems like it. You can fool yourself into thinking you know it better when you reread it, but it actually does not improve recall at all. Of course, it's easier to read something the second time you read it. It doesn't mean that you know it better. It doesn't mean that you know it better. Instead, what you need to do is you need to quiz yourself. So when you are reading something, pause every so often and ask yourself questions. Okay, what are the key ideas that I just read? What are some of the new ideas or new terms? Could I explain these new ideas or new terms? Could I connect them to some things that I already know? That self-quizzing, that will make it more likely that you will actually remember that material. Okay? Another thing that is important to do is we have to let our brain forget a little bit in between so that it's a little bit harder to retrieve that memory. So you want to space out your retrieval and you want to interleave different problem types and subjects. It feels harder, it takes longer, but it lasts longer, and that's the point. The easier it is to retrieve information, the less benefit you're going to get from retrieving it. And interleaving is more demanding on our brain, but it makes that learning more flexible, so we're more able to use it in different situations. And the other important thing here is that you want to make sure that you are practicing in the way that you will be asked to perform. So here's a fun little study. The San Luis Obispo baseball team decided to do a little study on maybe adding some extra batting practice and how that might help the players. So they were going to institute, they had their regular practices, and then they were going to institute this extra batting practice twice a week. And they split them into 3 groups. So this first group, you see they got 45 pitches, but they got them in blocks. So 15 fastballs, 15 curveballs, 15 change balls, okay? Change-ups. And then the second group got 45 pitches, but they got them in random order. And then the third group, they didn't do the extra practice at all. And while they were doing this first group, they started to feel like rock stars. Like they really felt like they were doing awesome because by the time they would get towards the end of their fastball blocks, they were nailing them. Same thing for the curveballs, same thing for the changeups. The group that was over here getting them in random order was getting really frustrated and felt like they weren't doing very well at all. And it hurt their brains, so to speak. So they felt as though they weren't really getting better by doing this particular thing. So guess what happens at the end of the 6 weeks? Group with no practice, they improved by 6.2%. Okay? So remember, they're still going to practice. They just didn't go to the extra batting practice. So it's likely that from their other practice, they were improving the 6.2% from that. Group that got the pitches in blocks, they improved by 24.8%, which I think is still pretty cool. But the group that got the pitches in random order, they improved by 56.7%. So notice the random pitching, that's an example of spacing, that's an example of interleaving, and it's also an example of practicing in the way that you will be asked to perform. So in a real baseball game, you have no idea what pitch is coming to you. So these guys were more prepared for the actual situation that they would encounter. So thinking back to when I just asked you guys to interpret the song, what would be good practice or good learning strategy so that you would be able to actually do that test? Practicing it. Practicing what? Because you don't know what song it's going to be. Practicing the signs. What else? If you're supposed to practice in the way you're going to be asked to perform. Stringing them together, find some other songs, maybe interpret some conversations. You want to practice in the way that you're going to be asked to perform. Okay? As teachers, it would be really helpful to our students if we were transparent about how we were going to assess them so that they could do that appropriate practice, that they can practice in the way that we want them to perform. So maybe frequent quizzing or frequent assignments or testing or practice tests, so that they have the opportunity to do that dress rehearsal we want them to do for the actual big assessments, whatever they may be. And also, if we give those frequent quizzes and assignments, it's giving them that retrieval practice that we want to make that learning much more long-lasting. What are some other strategies from the book? We're almost done, I promise. Elaboration, so we've talked a little bit about that, explaining in your own words and connecting it to what you already know. Generation and priming, so trying to answer a question or solve a problem before you know the answer, or activating prior knowledge, so things like warm-ups or review from something that happened last time in preparation for this time. These are all generation and priming activities. Unsuccessful attempts to do something to solve a problem, it actually encourages deep processing of the answer when you get it, and it makes it so that you'll be more likely to remember it. It's encoded in a more specific way than if you just are given the answer to the problem and you haven't struggled with it. Reflection, so taking a few minutes after you've learned something new to reflect on it, to review it, to teach your brain not to forget it, that it's important, please don't forget this. And a good way to kind of quiz yourself. So they talk about writing to learn as a strategy, teaching students after class to rewrite what they learn or summarize what they've learned on a page of notes to help make that memory much more long-lasting. And then mnemonics. A lot of us know what mnemonics are. So mnemonics are memory aids to help us recall something like a song or a poem or an abbreviation. This is one I remember when I was a kid. You guys know this one, right? The colors of the rainbow, Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Okay. A lot of people, when they know I teach math, they're like, PEMDAS, when I hate PEMDAS, so please don't say that one to me. Okay, so I know we're running long, so I'm going to stop, but what we were going to do right now is some retrieval practice. So practicing remembering our signs. Can we say red now? Can we say blue? Can we say green? Can we say white? Sky, well, we'll do it anyway. Trees, flowers, roses. What did we leave out? World, okay? So we just did some retrieval practice. That hopefully maybe, if you practice it again in an hour, it'll be more retrieval practice, and eventually you'll remember these and not forget them. Okay, see, I told you we're almost done. But my goal for today was to make us all think about our teaching and our learning apart from the content. So apart from the content we teach, apart from the content we're trying to learn. In 2003, the U.S. National Research Council published a study on motivating students to learn. And it says that for students to learn, they have to believe I can, I want to, and I belong. I can, I want to, I belong. So they have to believe I can learn with effort, appropriate strategies, and support. They have to believe I want to because education and learning is valuable to me. And they have to believe I belong in this academic environment. I think that pretty much describes motivation probably for all of us, even in non-academic environments. Acknowledging that there's more to learning than just the content. More to learning than just the content. And nobody has all of the answers. Neuroscience is exploding right now. I mean, every single day you're hearing something else, which, by the way, made it really hard to prepare for this because there's just too much every day. I could talk about that, I could talk about that. So it's exploding, but I think it's exciting. Neuroscience, cognitive psychology, education, all coming together to actually inform what we do better so that we understand better how learners learn, that we understand as learners what we should do to learn more. Okay. Here are some of the books that, just some, that I got kind of wrapped into in the last couple of years. I encourage you, if you're interested in a lot of these things, make it stick. This one's relatively new, Why Neuroscience Matters in the Classroom, is very, very interesting. A lot of research in it and a lot of strategies in it. Mindset is Carol Dweck's book. The ABCs of How We Learn, it's great for students and teachers. Peak, Secrets from the New Science of Expertise. That book is about deliberate practice, if you've heard the term deliberate practice or the 10,000 hour rule, and that's also relatively new and it's really interesting. And then How the Brain Learns, and How the Brain Learns Mathematics is one that's really been fun for me. And that's by David Sousa. He's the one that said we're brain changers. And he says that teaching is the only profession on this planet whose job it is to change the human brain every single day. So as teachers, as parents, as students, we're all changing brains. We're changing our own brains every day. I think that what we should do is we should keep this mantra in mind to help inform our teaching, to help inform our learning. I can, I want to, I belong. Thank you. Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks. Thank you. I'm done.
I do have the honor to be able to present to her the Faculty Lecturer Medallion, and so I'm very proud to be able to do this with all right, title, and authority that the Board of Trustees and the college has vested in me. I give you the 38. Congratulations.
Thank you. I have a gold medal.
There you go. Here's your box.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This is heavy. Starters, it's probably what all the Olympic athletes, this is the closest I'll ever get to an Olympic gold medal. What, yet? Yes, I'm sorry, yet. Thank you for sharing your afternoon with me. I know that we're all really busy, but I appreciate that you taking the time to come watch my crazy talk.